It's that time of year again. Christmas has come and gone and our attention shifts to the year ahead. With the new year come the tradition of crafting resolutions. But as you jot down your own, have you ever wondered if any philosophers created their own New Year's resolutions? What would a philosopher wish for in the new year? And is making resolutions not a superficial act which philosophers should condemn? Is it not arbitrary to choose a random date of the year to look back and try to become a better person? A philosopher, someone who strives for wisdom, should surely rise above this. Nietzsche has always been a philosopher who defied convention, and his approach to New Year's resolutions is no exception. In this video essay, we'll explore the concept of New Year's resolutions in a greater depth. So if you are interested in Nietzsche's New Year's resolution and want to learn more on how his resolutions show his unique position in the history of philosophy, stick around, and who knows, perhaps this year Nietzsche might just change your resolutions for the better. For the new year. I still live, I still think. I must still live, for I must still think. Sum ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. Today, everyone takes the liberty of expressing his wish and his favorite thought. Well, I also mean to tell what I have wished for myself today and what thought first crossed my mind this year. A thought which ought to be the basis, the pledge, and the sweetening of all my future life. I want more and more to perceive the necessary characters in things as the beautiful. I shall thus be one of those who beautify things. Amor Fati. Let that henceforth be my love. I do not want to wage war with the ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not even want to accuse the accusers. Looking aside, let that be my sole negation. And all in all, to sum up, I wish to be at any time hereafter only a yea-sayer. Nietzsche, as most people do at the end of the year, writes on his wishes for the new year. Central to his thought is the ability to see those things that are necessary as beautiful. In Nietzsche's worldview, suffering is an integral part of life, something which cannot be abolished. Life is a constant struggle with hardship and traumas of the past. One can be, quote-unquote, lucky in his dealings with sufferings, but all human life knows suffering. It is inevitable. Life is suffering. Suffering, to Nietzsche, can be seen as the ugliness of life. Some will conclude that a pessimistic outlook on life is inevitable, but this is not the message that Nietzsche takes away from his insights. Let us take a step back. Before we can get a full grasp of the meaning of Nietzsche's resolutions, it will be important to understand how suffering and desire is understood in most philosophies and religions. Suffering in other philosophies and religions. Let us start with suffering in Christianity. Christianity sees earthly suffering as a divine test of faith, a means to purify the soul, and a pathway to align with God's eternal plan of redemption. This view frames suffering as an essential part of the human condition, meant to prepare believers for the ultimate joy and justice of heaven. Far from being meaningless or arbitrary, suffering is imbued with purpose, as it serves to refine one's character and deepen one's reliance on God. Christ's crucifixion stands as the ultimate symbol of this belief, demonstrating that enduring suffering with faith leads to salvation and eternal glory. For Christians, present pain is often understood as a small price to pay for the infinite rewards of heaven, where all wounds will be healed and all tears wiped away. The fleeting desires and comforts of this world are thus subordinated to the promise of eternal fulfillment in God's presence. This perspective asks believers to accept suffering with humility and trust, emphasizing that its full meaning will only be revealed in the afterlife. In this way, Christianity redirects the human desire for meaning and resolution beyond earthly existence, offering solace in the hope of ultimate redemption and divine purpose. One can see this idea in Christian art as well. Take for example a painting of Rubens. Below, you can see people suffering, living in agony and throwing their gaze upwards. Above, we see heaven, a place free of suffering, a place filled with people living in peacefulness. This twofold view of life shows what is present in Christianity. Life is suffering, but the afterlife is not, so throw yourself in the Christian moral teachings to reach this heavenly afterlife. In ancient Greece, different ideas exist concerning suffering. Let us look at Epicureanism, for example. Epicureanism is a form of hedonism which holds that all people strive for is an abolishment of suffering, which they call ataraxia. When we experience pleasure, there are two factors at play. For example, when we eat, there is the pleasure of the taste, but also the abolishment of hunger. An Epicurist holds that once the desire is satisfied, no suffering will be present. We should strive for this state of non-suffering or ataraxia. To reach this state, the Epicurist distinguishes between three categories of desire: natural and necessary desire, natural and unnecessary desire, and unnatural and unnecessary desire. The natural and necessary desires are desires that are essential for survival and happiness, such as the desire for food, shelter, and companionship. Natural and unnecessary desires are desires that arise naturally but are not essential for happiness, such as the desire for luxury foods such as wine. Unnatural and unnecessary desires are desires that are unsatisfiable. They stem from social convention or vanity, such as the desire for excessive wealth, fame, addiction, or power, and often these desires feel like a thirst that can never be quenched. To live a fulfilled life, an Epicurist will argue that only the first and at times the second category of desire are to be satisfied. One should refrain from indulging in the unnatural and unnecessary desires, as these are unsatisfiable. When we strive towards this desire, all that we are left with is emptiness and suffering. Another great example of ancient views on suffering and desire is found in Stoic thought. If you want to learn more about it, check out our video we made on Epictetus a while back. In Eastern thought, desire and suffering take up a central role as well. For Buddhists, at the core of suffering lies desire, and at the core of desire lies the misinterpretation of our self. A Buddhist will argue that we are attached to life, yet life is transient, it is impermanence, and we should learn to accept this. In the life of Buddha, Siddhartha is confronted with suffering and sickness, aging and death to teach him the lesson of impermanence. The core teaching on suffering for Buddhists is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Truth number 1, dukkha, the truth of suffering. Life is inherently marked by suffering, dissatisfaction, and impermanence. This includes physical and emotional pain, the inevitability of aging, and the transient nature of pleasures. Truth number 2, samudaya, the truth of the origin of suffering. The root cause of suffering is desire and attachment, driven by ignorance. This craving leads to clinging to desires, possessions, and false beliefs, perpetuating the cycle of suffering. Number 3, nirodha, the truth of the cessation of suffering. It is possible to end suffering by extinguishing craving and attachment. This state of liberation and freedom from suffering is known as nirvana. Or, as Gautama Buddha said, there is an antidote to suffering, freeing yourself from desire, from attachment, and from the self. Truth number 4, the truth of the path of cessation of suffering. The Eightfold Path provides the practical guidelines to overcome suffering and achieve enlightenment. We strive for an abolishment of suffering in Buddhism by realizing that our desires are rooted in the attachment we have to the things that are impermanent. Anatta, or not-self, is a core Buddhist teaching that denies the existence of a permanent, unchanging self. People mistakenly believe in a fixed I or self, which leads to clinging to the ego, identity, and possessions. This belief in a permanent self leads to desire, as we seek to protect, satisfy, and enhance this imagined self. From this desire, suffering arises. To eliminate suffering, we must accept life's impermanence, which in turn dissolves the desire from which our suffering is born. In all three positions, Christianity, Epicureanism, and Buddhism, suffering is linked with desire. In Christianity, it is the wrongfully oriented desire. In Epicureanism, it is the unnecessary and unnatural desires in which we should refrain from indulging, and in Buddhism, it is desire as a whole that causes us to suffer. Both suffering and desire are seen as negative aspects of life in these strains of thought, a negative aspect that should be abolished. Suffering and resent for Nietzsche. Nietzsche breaks in the most radical sense with the views on suffering and desire present in ancient Greece, Christianity, and Buddhism. Nietzsche despises those who with diminished desire preach an ascetic lifestyle and therefore shun away from suffering. Rather, he would focus on the positive sides of suffering. Imagine a climber tackling a mountain. As he approaches the mountain, he feels demotivated by the steep hills he must walk and climb. As he starts his walk, he is confronted with the feeling of pain and strain in his legs. His breathing gets heavier and a feeling of discouragement arises. Yet through the strength, he pushes these feelings away and continues his climb. Many more moments arise, but when he tackles all of them, he reaches the top. And it is at the tops of mountains that the most beautiful views arise. Nietzsche uses the metaphor of the climber to show how life might be filled with hardship, yet in its core he is convinced that people can tackle it and make good of the cards they are dealt with. Nietzsche even goes a step further by arguing that life needs suffering, as through suffering we can reach greatness. For greatness, a change at the very core of our being is necessary. Christianity and other strains of thought have imprinted us with the idea that desire and suffering are negative experiences that should be abolished, or as Nietzsche puts it, you want, if possible, and there is no more insane, if possible, to abolish suffering, and it really seems that we would rather have it higher and worse than ever. Well-being, as you understand it, that is no goal, that seems to us an end, a state that soon makes man ridiculous and contemptible, that makes his destruction desirable. The discipline of suffering, of great suffering, do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements so far in man? If we are to transform our lives and aspire to greatness, we must transvaluate our values and adopt a perspective on suffering that differs from what history has traditionally taught us. We need to value suffering and desire as integral parts of the beauty of life. It is in Nietzsche's New Year's resolution that he advocates this stance towards suffering. So let us now focus on the text itself. Nietzsche's New Year's resolution is published in Nietzsche's The Gay Science. Associate link to this book is underneath the video. Published under the heading Sanctua Januarius, a reference to the two-faced god Janus. This Roman god had one face looking backwards and one looking forward. This is a subtle nod at the idea of what resolutions are, a reflection and looking back on what happened the past year to turn the head forward and make life better. For Nietzsche, things are never quite so simple. One of Nietzsche's core ideas is the eternal return, a thought experiment that forces us to look at our past and into the future and ponder. Do we want to relive our lives identically into all eternity? Do we want to relive all suffering in our lives? And do we want to relive all happiness and all our cherished moments? And if we were to answer yes, what kind of stance towards life is needed to reach this? The thought experiment of the eternal return forces us to ponder on all sorts of suffering and how to deal with them. How do we, in the spirit of Nietzsche, transform our suffering into greatness so that its eternal return is always welcomed? We should strengthen ourselves from the suffering, make ourselves great. Yet, suffering is twofold. Can all suffering be transformed into greatness? Is there suffering in life that is so great that it cannot be transformed? Aren't there scars from our past that haunt us still? Can we still grow from these past traumas? These are all valid questions that should be presented to someone who upholds Nietzsche's ideas of suffering and transformation. Nietzsche, being the sharp thinker that he is, thought about these valid considerations as well. It is at this point that we arrive at the meaning of Nietzsche's resolutions. Suffering that cannot be transformed to greatness should be accepted as a part of life, not by transforming it into greatness, but by accepting it as an integral part of our life. One should force himself to see the beauty in these necessary parts of life. Or, as Nietzsche writes it, I shall thus be one of those who beautify things. Amor Fati, that henceforth be my love. Amor Fati, or the love of one's fate, is Nietzsche's great resolution for the new year. This wisdom is only strengthened in his thought experiment of the eternal return. Imagine a universe where time runs in a circle so that your life, as you have lived it and will live it, will return identically for all eternity. Nietzsche lays a heavy emphasis on the moment you realize what the thought experiment means. All your suffering and hardship will return identically. All past traumas and scars are to be relived. One is forced to beautify those things or perish under the heavy weight of this thought experiment. In Beyond Good and Evil, affiliate link underneath, Nietzsche uses the metaphor of the gardener. A gardener sees a rugged plot of land with a crooked creek running through it. At first, it seems unremarkable, even unpleasant. An awful gardener would judge this piece of land useless and move on. Yet a great gardener would see opportunity. With care, they would shape the creek's edges, turning its bends into gentle arcs. They plant flowers and trees along its bank, making it a home for beauty and growth. The creek remains. It is not erased, but embraced, becoming a feature of the garden's charm. In life too, we must work with what we are given, transforming the rough into something remarkable. We all have traumas in our past or certain character flaws that aren't transformable. Yet, like the gardener, we should accept the necessary and see it as beauty. Imagine shaping your own life like a gardener does to accept and beautify the ugliness that lies in our own lives. This is Nietzsche's great resolution for the end of the year. To fully embrace suffering, we should consider Nietzsche's two metaphors, the climber and the gardener. The climber is the individual who channels their suffering into growth, striving for transformation and the attainment of greatness. This metaphor captures the spirit of overcoming adversity, of striving higher and turning pain into achievement. Yet the image of the climber falters when confronted with suffering that is too immense, too insurmountable to be overcome through sheer effort. It is in these moments that the gardener steps forward, offering a different response to suffering. The gardener embodies acceptance. Rather than seeking to transcend suffering, the gardener embraces it as an inner part of life. This archetype invites us to accept the necessary hardship of existence, to nurture them and to beautify life in their presence. This is the essence of Amor Fati, the love of fate. To live as a gardener is to reshape one's perspective, incorporating suffering not by transforming it into greatness, but by affirming it and finding meaning within its unchangeable reality. The climber transforms but struggles to accept. The gardener accepts and in doing so cultivates beauty. Together, these two perspectives offer a more complete understanding of how to engage with suffering. The climber teaches us resilience and the pursuit of greatness, while the gardener shows us grace and the ability to flourish amidst life's inevitabilities. In this interplay between the climber's striving and the gardener's acceptance, we uncover the profound wisdom of Nietzsche's New Year's resolution, a call to embrace life in its totality, with all its trials, and to craft meaning from every experience. A radical stance that hopes to eviscerate views on suffering found in prior religions and philosophy. How can Nietzsche's New Year's resolutions inspire us? Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to rethink the very nature of New Year's resolutions. Instead of setting superficial goals like exercising more, picking up a hobby, or dieting, Nietzsche would encourage us to aim for something far deeper, a complete reorientation of how we live and how we face life's difficulties. A list of resolutions focused on external accomplishments, he might argue, fails to address the core of our existence. How we confront suffering, hardship, and the pursuit of meaning, that is what lies at the core of life. For Nietzsche, the most transformative resolution would be to cultivate a radical acceptance of life as it is, including desire and its suffering. This could mean resolving not to shy away from pain, but to embrace it as a source of growth and self-discovery. It's not about improving in a single aspect of your life, but developing the strength and courage to face the entirety of existence with an affirmative stance, a willingness to say yes to every experience, good or bad. Imagine writing resolutions like, I will face challenge without resent. I will seek meaning in adversity. I will learn to love life and love fate, no matter where it leads me. These commitments go beyond surface level goals. They aim to transform the way we engage with life itself. This shift from avoiding discomfort to embracing it is what Nietzsche would see as a true renewal, a rebirth of the self. In these resolutions, greatness for your year awaits. By focusing our resolutions on changing how we live rather than what we do, we move closer to Nietzsche's vision of human flourishing, to become stronger, more resilient, and more authentic through the trials of existence. In this sense, New Year's becomes not just a time for planning improvements, but for affirming life in its totality and resolving to meet it with the courage it demands. So, let me share some last words of wisdom from Nietzsche with you, my friends. To all our viewers and subscribers, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatments, indignities, I wish that they should not remain unfamiliar with profound self-contempt, the torture of self-mistrust, the wretchedness of the vanquished. I have no pity for you, because I wish you the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not. That one endures. Did you enjoy this video? Want to learn more about Nietzsche? Consider liking, subscribing, and go ahead and check out our other videos on the man with the mustache. Would you like to support our work so that we can create more content? You can find our Ko-fi page right here. For now, we are happy to serve you with philosophy. Bye, and a Happy New Year.